The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
Want to shake up your small business marketing? I mean, really shake it up.
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Have you been thinking about doing your own podcast?
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Would you like to take your business to the next level?
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
This is the golden age of podcasting, and it's time to stop thinking and start doing.
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Get your message heard 24/7, 365, over and over again.
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Welcome to the 21st century.
Welcome to the Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Here's the creator and host of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, David Garofalo.
Welcome, everybody, to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, a 21-minute or less weekly podcast to help you get your message out, grow your business, and build your bottom line. That's what it's all about. Let me help you bring your marketing and advertising into the 21st century. My name is David Garofalo. I've been doing podcasting since 2010, and I created a six-figure income from that business. Your podcast is a business. This is a 21-minute podcast or less. So let's start the clock. And here we go. Today's topic is going to be, why do people stop doing their podcast? Why do they stop doing it? So let's look at what happens when someone's thinking about doing a podcast. First thing is, they are thinking, and most of them, to be honest with you, actually never get started. There's a whole bunch of people out there that are thinking about doing a podcast. They've been thinking about it for so long. I've met a lot of them because we have a Studio 21 Podcast Cafe where people come in and talk to us about doing podcasting. We've been having this podcast for over a year. I've met with hundreds of people, and I actually check to see if they go off and do their podcast alone. And maybe that's an option. They say, I don't want to spend the money. I just want to do it myself. And that's good. If you want to do it yourself, it's a lot of work to it. Do it yourself. Get going. But, not one time has that happened. The person's thinking about doing a podcast. They meet with us, and actually a year has gone by, and they've actually never started the podcast. Never getting started. The ones that do get started prepare for what they expect their podcast is going to be. And it's never going to be what you expect it's going to be. And they work so hard to end up putting their show together, and it is never what they expect to do. And that's what holds them back, is they're waiting so long to prepare to do it and to get off and rolling. They have to get off and rolling. We had a new podcaster come in to do their first show. And I've been talking to them for months and months about getting their show started. And they planned a date where they were going to start, which was months after we had sit and talked. And then it went another month even after that as they were preparing and planning to end up getting their show off the ground. And finally, we had a date that was going to happen. And they wanted it to be perfect. I understand. So to keep putting it off because we want the show to actually be perfect. And finally came the launch date. And on the launch date, they showed up to do it, but their person that was coming as their guest, their first guest on the show, and there's a host and a co-host, but the first guest actually called up to cancel because something personal happened to them.
And it was important because it's an interview format show.
Yes.
So without the guest,
it wasn't going to happen.
No.
And it didn't happen. So here they are, launch date, planning, and here's the date finally comes, and the launch never ends up happening. No show and no plan B, which is, I want to do a whole show on plan B someday, but that's not going to be today's show or next week's show. But they had no plan B also, so it was no show. And then it was, okay, we're going to reschedule for next week, same time, same bat channel, right? So next week comes, and they're waiting for the guest. And here they are again, standing there, waiting till right before the show starts. And actually, it does happen. The guest shows up. But again, no plan B. It was going to be, their show was contingent on their first guest. Right. Whether the show is even going to happen at all is contingent on their first guest. So now they're 2 weeks in. They're actually probably about 4 or 5 months in at this point, is the guest going to show up? And at the very last minute, the guest shows up. And to be honest with you, the show was great. For a first time out, they had pre-planned everything. The questions were good. The guest was great. Everything was good.
It was as good a first show as I've seen.
Yes, yeah. So they pulled it off, but why did they wait so many months to start the show? Because they actually put the show all together the week previous. It was a 1 week planned show that actually took them 5 or 6 months to end up putting together. They could have saved a lot of time and just done this all in the 1 week that it takes to prepare for your first show, which is going to be the most you're going to prepare for a show. But it's not months.
And I think it's important to say that's what it takes to prepare for one of our shows. But if you just want to do it yourself, you've got a lot to figure out before.
Yes.
And that's all the technical stuff of posting it.
Absolutely. So they're not going to do all the stuff you do. We do that, and we do it on a regular basis. Here, they're coming in. All they need is the content of their show, like I have in my hand, some bullet points, some notes that we're going to talk about.
A logo, it doesn't have to be the final product even to get started for the show.
Get started, and we can change all those things, and you can change all those things. You can change the name of your show later. You can do whatever you want to do. But the key is to get off and rolling, and I'm sure they're thinking today, boy, we should have done that 6 months ago, and here we are off and rolling. And we got a new year coming out. So you want to get ready for the new year. Get ready to do your show if you haven't done your show before. So are we okay here, Ed? Because I saw a glitch, but we're okay.
We're good.
All right. So get it off the ground, or else what ends up happening is you're going to lose the excitement that you have from the day the person comes in and talks to me about doing a show, and we sit down and we strategize a little bit and come up with a name and a plan and everything, and they leave here very, very excited. And then you wait 6 months before you launch the show, and to be honest with you, the excitement is gone from you. Not from me. I'm still excited about getting the show off the ground, but I can see it. I can see this person. It's not so exciting anymore because you let the luster of this new thing disappear.
And you and I often have conversations about the people on the network. Doesn't seem like things are going right for that guy. And then we spend time with coaching and motivating.
We're gonna see it. We're gonna see it in you, and then we're gonna try to get you back on track to end up enjoying it. I mean, part of the thing is, yes, I say treat it as a business and make it successful and all that, but there's a big thing about you got to be liking doing this too, or else you're going to stop doing it. So we're going to try to keep you happy and keep you motivated, or else what happens is no show. Or you're going to stop doing it, right? The second you get unmotivated, you're going to stop doing it. So how much time do you need to do your show to get your first show off the ground? For the first show, I think it is more time needed than any other episode you're going to do.
Absolutely.
Because we're going to try to figure out how to schedule it, segment it, and different things are going to happen. How does the show open? What are you going to say at the very beginning of the show? How do you go to break if you're going to have a break? How do you end the show? What are some things that you have to put in there?
And I think the important thing is you want a vision for the show. You want to do some preparation, but you have to realize the show will become what it becomes.
It will become
so
the show.
If you spend too much time on the whole vision, then you get attached to that vision, even if it's not the right thing for the show.
Right, and I haven't seen one yet that starts and finishes the way it was. They never planned out. It becomes a working thing.
Even when we launched Snack Authority, the format of the show was pretty fuzzy to start, and we're starting to settle into, okay, this is what works for us. This is what's
working, that's what gets comfortable, right? So that's exactly true. You're going to have to spend a little more time on your first one, but then it shouldn't be all that much time. Maybe a meeting with you and your co-host for a couple of hours to give you enough time for a 30-minute podcast. So I'd say 2 hours planning your copy, your show notes, and everything for your first episodes. After that, it actually should be less than the show itself.
And you know, that's another reason the co-host is so important. You need somebody who's going to motivate you and somebody that you can motivate. If you get a naysayer, it's going to drag you down and convince you to stop doing it.
This is you're going into business with this person, just like a marriage, basically.
Yep.
You know, you're going to be tied to the hip with this person, and part of your success or failure is going to be on their end too.
And
so
really, you should like your co-host. It comes across.
Oh yeah.
Even in the audio, if you get along well and you have a good relationship, then the audience senses that.
If you're able to carry a conversation on with them on a regular basis for whatever topic you're talking about, this is what a podcast is. We're having a conversation here, and there's people eavesdropping on our conversation, right?
That's why the prep is so important. If you have two people independently preparing, then they end up stepping all over each other because one thinks the show's going in this direction.
Right. So here's a good tip. Format your show into 3 segments. People like it when it's segmented. It will be something that they'll be used to, and it's going to make it easy for you.
They get comfortable with it, and they like the regularity of it.
Yeah.
They know what to expect next.
So it's going to make your prep easier, too, for your ongoing shows. Again, you're doing your first show, and you plan on here's how it's going to be segmented. It might change. It might turn into more or less or everything, but at least your first one goes that way. And your ongoing shows, right after you finish your first show, you're going to say, okay, we don't need to do this and we don't need to do that, but we do need to add this. Your second show gets more segmented and more in a line. And then, believe me, after you get into 10 episodes or something, you probably got a good format at 10 in, I would guess. It's easier and more fun to have it that way, and the more fun you have, the better chance you're going to keep your podcasting going. You need to be kept excited about your podcast, and you might get excited as it's going well. It's going easier for you to do it. You get more excited because this is easier than I thought it was going to be. I'm happier, you're more excited, you're going to keep going. It's something we're looking at Studio 21 when we're dealing with a new podcaster. Our success is keeping them motivated and going on as this is going. The more they go on, the more successful they will be. We're going to get to some stats and show you that in a minute. When you get excited to do a podcast or any project that you're doing, use your excitement to make it great. As you get less excited, it will be harder to keep it going. And after you have started, after you've lost the spark, you may never be able to get that spark back. And it will completely go out, the flame will go out, and the show is over. The number one reason people stop doing a podcast is they have lost the spark. That's the number one reason. You need to devote your time to the show, and you should want to do it. You should want to devote your time to the show. So that is something to really keep in mind as you're doing it. Time is so valuable for you, so you need to have time to do it. So you're probably going to have to stop doing something in order to start doing your podcast. And you need to think about that. What should you stop? You want to stop going to the gym? Or do you like going to the gym? Well, if you like going to the gym, you don't want to stop going to the gym. Better yet, stop spending hours on social media. Maybe you spend 3 hours a week on social media. Cut it down to 1 hour a week and use those other 2 weeks for prep and to do your show. Quit that TV show you've been watching for years. Say, okay, I'm going to give up this show. It's an hour show that I watch every week. I'm going to stop doing that. And instead of doing that, that's going to be the hour I'm going to do my prep every single week. That's prep time. Quit something and devote that same time to your prep for preparing for your show. And I would say to schedule your prep time and schedule the time you're going to do your show every single week. This is the time that my prep time is. If it's Wednesday at 9 o'clock at night, it's Wednesday at 9 o'clock at night. From 9 to 10, you're going to do your prep for your show. And on Thursday or Friday, you're going to do your show between 1 and 1:30.
And that schedule keeps your show from becoming a worry and a distraction all week. I should be.
When am I going to do this? I have to get my time in to do my prep. I haven't done my prep yet. Well, if Wednesday at 9 o'clock has passed, what did you didn't do it.
You're late.
Right. Schedule your prep time and schedule the time you're doing on the show. It's very, very important. We have that locked up here with every one of our podcasters. This is when they're doing the show. Whether they like it or not, this is when you're doing the show. And at the beginning, I tell them, I know if God forbid something happens, we'll schedule a different time for you. A snowstorm happens or something, we will do it. But we want to let you know that we're going to hit your credit card basically on that time, not because we want to make sure we grab onto your money. We want to keep you motivated and know that this is what time it's going to be. We want to keep you on schedule. And on schedule is going to be success, not coming back even on the same day, right? We don't want you to do your... As you're beginning to get ready for the show, being out here in the audience, doing your prep work for the show, not good.
No.
Do your prep work days before. That schedule it a couple of days before at an oddball time, and the day of your show, you come in and you're ready to go. And again, we're going to get to Plan B on another episode because you show up all ready to go, and then your guest doesn't show up.
And I think it's fine. Do your prep on a different day. And before the show, review it. Make sure that everything still looks right to you, and just go through what is the script for your show. Make sure that you know, so you're not just reading from a sheet for the whole show.
Sure. So did you know a lot of people not only wait a long time to do their first podcast, but their first podcast is their only podcast? We were blown away with the number of people who did only one podcast ever. And when the majority of people stop doing their podcast shows, that becomes a problem. We'll get to those stats and find out that number in just 1 minute.
If you're in the area of Boston North into southern New Hampshire and you're thinking about doing a podcast, there is a place you have to see. It's called Studio 21 Podcast Café. Located right over the border into Salem, New Hampshire, Studio 21 Podcast Café is a live, working, full-service podcast and vodcast, that's video on demand, studio. All professional equipment, professional producer, and total distribution of your podcast is done for you. Would you like search engine optimization for more people to find your business or better ranking on Google? Well, Studio 21 Podcast Cafe can do it all for you for far less than you think. Schedule a free 21-minute no-obligation consultation by going to www.studio21podcast.cafe. That's studio21podcast.cafe. Now, back to the program.
And we're back, and today we're talking about why do people stop doing their podcasting. We know that the first thing is they never get started. So there's a whole bunch of people that never actually get started doing their podcast. If they do their podcast and they do get started, wait till you hear this. What do you think is the percentage of all shows that only do one podcast?
Oh, I know the answer.
Isn't it crazy, though?
It really just blew my mind. I know. I had heard the stat, and when I came and told you, it was unbelievable.
So the number is 12% of all podcasts, that's a huge number, of all podcasts are one and done. They do one podcast and never do another one. We're talking about 550,000 shows that are out there. That's 66,000 people. 12% of every show that was ever made is one and done. They talked about it. They thought about it. They said, we want to do this podcast. They did the hardest part of all is getting the first podcast up and rolling, and then that's it. I'm done. So why is that? I think the biggest reason is the procrastination in the first place. Waiting till the spark was gone. They waited and waited. Listen, you're on the sidelines, you're still thinking about it. You're going to blow it. You're going to be a one-and-done guy. Don't do it. Get it going. Keep the spark alive.
Here's the thing that occurs to me. Perfection is exhausting.
Oh, my God.
So if you put everything into that first show, you've got nothing left. The tank's empty.
That's it. So the average amount of all episode shows, 550,000 shows, and 12% of those people did only one show. Now, over 50% of all podcasters did only 14 shows or less. 50% of all of them, of 550,000, more than half of them only did 14 shows, and it's over.
It's done. So, 3.5 months or something.
Oh, my God. So now your 550,000 is less than half that. We're talking about 200,000 active shows. We're talking about 14 shows or less. So that is everybody saying, I can do this, and then deciding later, I guess I can't do this, right? And what's the reason? The technical part of it, the exhaustion of it, I ran out of things to talk about, all the different things. But what a gigantic number. More than half of them are failures.
Yeah. It's crazy.
More than half are failures. Because I would say if you did 14 shows and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, some things are meant to be episodic, right? They put it out as here's a 14-episode story.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
I guess.
But that's not a big percentage. It's a tiny number.
Wow. So what about the great ones? What about the most popular podcasts of all? And you know who I'm talking about, the big podcasts that get all the hits and everybody talks about. The most popular podcasts have about 200 episodes or more available, meaning they stood the test of time. If those are weekly podcasts, we're talking about 4 years of podcasting. And like any business, it takes years. 3 years to break even, and 4 years to start showing a profit. I'm talking about any business at all. The same goes for podcasting. I tell you, podcasting is a business. 3 years to actually be noticed, to be known, and 4 years to become a success. And that is if your show, your concept, and your quality of your show is good to begin with. And I'm talking about the audio, if you're doing video portion to it, if the segmented, if the show is good in the first place, if you have good prep, good guests, good everything, if all that is good to begin with, then we're talking about 4 years. If all that is good to begin with, you still only did 1 year in, you're not popular because you haven't put in the time.
Right.
And that's what it's going to require. Like going to a gym. You might need a trainer or a coach to keep you going. Maybe a co-host can be that coach helping you along the way and pushing you, and you doing the same for them. Hopefully that's the case. We do it for our podcasters here, and we are batting 1,000, I'm proud to say. Every podcaster did more than one show that we have on the Studio 21 Podcast Café. So that's above the bottom 12%, right, automatically. Every show that we have been associated with has done at least the 14 shows. So we're over the 50% barrier right off the bat. We're only in business about a year right now. So everyone, we've motivated to keep them on for as long as they've been doing their show, okay? And we can try to motivate you. And that's what we try to do. Are you ready to get serious with your podcast or begin a new podcast or another podcast? If you are in the Boston to Southern New Hampshire area, please make an appointment with us and let us help you. Here at Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, we deliver a clean, professional studio with state-of-the-art equipment, a professional engineer and producer, here to make you sound good and to look good and to keep you motivated and excited to do your podcast, and success is around the corner at that point. Are you too busy to do it yourself? We can help. We'd love to work with you. Please contact me at dave@studio21podcast.cafe. That's dave@studio, the number 21 podcast.cafe. Schedule a free 21-minute meeting with me. Let me show you the studio. We'll talk about your thoughts and your plans and get you going. Next week, it's Thanksgiving Eve. Is your show a turkey, or is it becoming one? Don't let it happen. Let us help you. We're going to talk about that next week. That's my 21 minutes or less, and we are out of here. You've been listening to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, live from the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe on the United Podcast Network.
Opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.